Dear friends, so far in the subject of control engineering with the subject code of 17ME73, we have learned in all the previous sessions about what is a control system, what are the various types of control systems, what do you mean by control action, what are the various types of controllers available. And then we also got to know about how to mathematically model the functionality of a control system. And then we also went on to learn about obtaining the transfer function with the various techniques such as block diagram reduction technique or the signal flow graphs technique or so. Then we also learned that in order to know the stability of the system, in order to know the performance of the system, there are two major ways. One is time domain analysis, the other one is frequency domain analysis. And we went on to learn the frequency domain analysis with the use of the Nyquist plots, polar plots as well as Bode plots to assess the stability of the system. Now, one more very important and very commonly applicable graphical cum analytical method of time domain analysis to know the performance of a system is to be discussed in this particular session. The approach is called root locus or root locus technique. The technique of assessing the performance of the system is called root locus technique. So, this is what we are going to learn in module 3, and this module 3 will cover the topics such as the time response analysis, and one of the techniques of time response analysis or time domain analysis is root locus technique. That is what we are going to discuss today in this session. Now, before we could jump into the actual analytics of the root locus technique, it is important to know the preamble, it is important to know the basic concepts of root locus technique. See, whenever we call a system to be a good control system, then what is important for us is to know the performance of the control system. When do we call a system to be a good control system? Only when the performance of the system is going to be very good. Now, from the control engineering perspective, what it means to say by performance? Performance means to say, from the control engineering perspective, it is to be addressed to a system when a system is very stable, when a system has very high accuracy, when a system is having the very high speed of response, then when its bandwidth is quite high, when oscillations are low. As such, if any system satisfies or scores very high and on all these requirements of a control system, then we tend to say that the performance of the system is very good. When the performance of the system is very good, only then we are going to accord any system to be a good control system. Now, for an engineer, why it is important to know about this technique is because in the design and analysis of any control system, it is important to investigate the performance of the control system when one or more of the parameters to the system are varied over a given range. What does it mean to say parameter? Means all inputs are called parameters. The outputs are to be addressed as variables. What we get from the system is variable. What we give it to the system are the parameters. In order to design and analyze any good control system, then it is important to know the performance of the system. The performance of the system, that means to say, in order to design and analyze any good control system, it is important to know the performance of the system, means to say whether the system will be stable, whether the system will be accurate, whether the system will be having very high speed of response. As such, that is what is meant by performance. So, it is important to know the performance of the system when one or more parameters, that is when one or more of the input parameters are varied over a given range. Consider the example of the ceiling fan, consider the example of a microwave oven or any of the systems. Now, consider the example of a ceiling fan itself. What is the input to the system? Electrical energy in terms of voltage and current. What is the output? It is the rotation of the fan. Now, if we want to call the system of the ceiling fan as a good control system means its performance should be very good. That if the performance of the fan, ceiling fan system has to be very good, then that means to say whenever the input to the ceiling fan system is what? Electrical energy in terms of voltage and current. Whenever voltage or current is varied over a given range of values, then we will check whether for various values of the input parameters such as voltage and current to the ceiling fan system, whether still the fan continues to be stable. It will not undergo the whirling condition. It will not reach the critical speed. It will not vibrate. It will not vibrate rationally. Its vibration will be in a controlled limit itself. Not just that, the fan speed will be consistent. So all such situations are addressed as stable. So even when we vary the voltage or the current, the performance of the system, the performance of the ceiling fan system must be stable. Then whatever input we give, that amount of transformation of energy to mechanical energy in terms of rotation of the fan should take place. Then we will call it as an accurate system. Then as soon as we give the input, instantaneously if this fan starts rotating, then we call it as good speed of response. If for any given range of values of voltage and current, if the fan exhibits, the ceiling fan system exhibits stability, accuracy, good speed of response, then we tend to say that the performance of the ceiling fan system is very, very good. That is what is the concept, that in order to design and analyze any good control system, then it is important to investigate what happens to the performance of the system, in turn stability, accuracy and speed of response when one or more parameters or one or more input parameters are varied over a given range of values. Now, how do we know this? How do we know whether the system performance is good or not? When one or more parameters, that is the input to the system, is varied over a given range of values, then this root locus technique will come into rescue, or this root locus technique is going to help us out. Now, to understand this, what we tend to say is the system functionality will normally be represented by a characteristic equation. We have known during the previous sessions also that the standard form of a characteristic equation for any given control system is represented by 1 plus GSHS equal to 0. That is what is addressed as the characteristic equation. Now, when one or more input parameters to the system are varied over a given range of values, then the roots of the characteristic equation which is representing the functionality of the system also get varied. Now, when we plot these roots in S plane, then it results in continuous curves, and these curves are known as root loci. Singular is root locus and plural is root loci. Now, what do we get from this plot, the plot of root loci or root locus? What do we get from it? What information do we get? Now, when we plot the root loci in the S plane, then very important inferences can be drawn from the plot. Number one, whether the system is stable for any values of given input parameters. Like if you apply this to the ceiling fan system, can you keep on continuing or increasing the voltage and the current, and yet the system continues to be stable, or does it become unstable at some stage? And if it becomes unstable after crossing a certain amount of values of input parameter over a given range, then for what amount of gain, for what amount of input does the system becomes unstable? So from this beginning it may continue to be stable. You just keep on adding the input, then a stage will reach, the system says enough, the system becomes unstable. What is the value of that input parameter at which the system becomes unstable? It is very important information, and that you will be able to know from the root locus technique. Then at that amount of time when the system becomes just unstable, then what will be the frequency? What will be the frequency at which the system becomes just unstable? So that you could get to know at what frequency the system is becoming unstable, for what amount of input that is the gain the system becomes unstable, you will be able to know with the root locus technique. And the value of k, that is the gain, you will be able to know from the root locus technique. Those are very, very important informations. So, you will not just get to know the system is stable or not from root locus technique, you will also get to know when you vary the input parameters over a given range of values, then does the system continue to be stable or does it become unstable after we increment the value of input parameter over a given range of values. Now, if it becomes unstable at the later stage, then what is the value of input at which the system becomes unstable? Then at what frequency does it become unstable? So, all such important parameters are very important to be known, so that we could design the system, we could design a control system wherein we will not allow the system to reach unstable stage, thereby our design will become safe and that will be useful to the society. If we do not take care about the stability factor with the system performance of the system, then what may happen is we may have designed a system, the system may start functioning also, but still what may happen is if we have not designed a system taking into consideration about the importance of limiting the input parameter to a certain value, then what it may result is, if the customer takes it home and then if he starts giving the input parameter, then he may reach very soon a stage where the system will start acting in a very unstable fashion. So, that should not happen. And then obviously what happens, once the system becomes unstable, the customer dissatisfaction will be the ultimate result and we will lose the market for our products in this system. So, because of which it is very important in the product development stage that the engineers who are involved in design and analysis of any good control system, they study the performance, they study the stability, speed of response and accuracy as the requirements are the parameters that will carry the performance of the system, right. So, by varying the input parameter over a given range of values, we must study the performance of the system. We must get to know whether the system will continue to be stable for any values of input parameters, or for what values of input parameter the system will be stable and for what values it becomes unstable. If we are able to know this, then we can incorporate those input values into the design process and we can design a very safe control system. How are we going to do it? By the help of root locus technique. Root locus plot. What does root locus plot do? What is a root locus plot? Whenever we vary the input parameters over a given range of values, then the roots of the characteristic equation that represents the functionality of the control system also get varied. If we plot these roots in S plane, then it results in continuous curves and these curves are known as root loci. Root locus is singular, root loci are plural. Then what do we get out of root locus or root loci plot? Then what we get to know is what is the value of input parameter or the gain, that is k, if we talk in terms of the transfer function, open loop transfer function or closed loop transfer function, the value k, what is the value of k, what is the value of gain, what is the value of input parameter at which the system becomes just unstable, thereafter it continues to be unstable. What is that value? Then at what frequency does it become unstable? These very important information which are very, very important from the standpoint of design process of a control system, we will be able to know. That is what is the ultimate positive outcome from the root locus technique. Now, how do we go for it? How do we go for the development or evolving a root locus plot? There are 10 rules which will help us out then in developing the analytics for plotting a root loci or for making a root locus plot. The analytics you have to develop to evolve a root locus plot or root loci, and those analytics will be, we will be able to get those analytics by following the guidelines or 10 rules for root locus plot or root locus technique. Now, what are those 10 rules or 10 steps for root locus plot or plotting a root loci. Number one, every root loci or the branch of root loci will have to have a starting point. What are the starting points? The starting point for any root loci or the branch of any root locus is nothing but, they are also termed as k is equal to 0 points. All poles are the starting points. That is the very first and foremost thing that we have to know before we get into the root locus plotting techniques is that we must ensure that the given problem is brought down to open loop transfer function. The very first thing that needs to be observed, whether it is Nyquist plot, whether it is Bode attenuation diagrams or Bode plot, or it is root locus plot, the concept of evolving a Nyquist plot or the process of evolving a Nyquist plot or the process of evolving a Bode attenuation diagrams or the process of evolving a root locus plot starts from, first we have to ensure that the given system or the given problem is in terms of open loop transfer function, that is GSHS. If it is not, then we will have to bring it down to open loop transfer function, and then we have to start applying the process of developing the analytics for either Nyquist plot or Bode plot, or as in our present case the root locus plot. So, first step is, first ensure whether the given problem is in terms of open loop transfer function or not, that is GSHS. Now, the very first step in developing the analytics for the root locus plot is, it has to have a starting point. The root locus or root loci, the branches of root loci will have to start at some point. So, starting point, and it is also termed as k is equal to 0 point. So, the root loci always starts at poles. If there is a transfer function given, that is open loop transfer function, then the numerator terms are called zeros, the denominator terms are called poles. So, maybe for example, s into s plus 1 into s plus 2, then s is equal to 0, s plus 1 is equal to 0, s plus 2 is equal to 0, you can take that. Then what you will get, s is equal to 0, s is equal to minus 1, s is equal to minus 2. So, 0, minus 1, minus 2, which are present in the denominator of a open loop transfer function, they are termed as the starting points. So, that is what all poles will be the starting points. That is the first step in the process of evolving the analytics for drawing the root locus plot. Then, number 2, if there are starting points, then there have to be finishing points for any branches of root loci. So, finishing points are also called k is equal to infinity points, and all zeros will be the finishing points. All zeros, root loci terminates at zeros. So, all zeros of the given open loop transfer function will be the terminating points or the finishing points. Now, one important thing that is to be noted over here is, see, the number of branches of root loci for any given system will be equal to the number of starting points. Number of starting points. How many starting points will be there? That means how many poles will be there, poles of open loop transfer function will be there, those many starting points will be there, and those many branches of root loci will also be there. Now, if in case there are say 3 poles, then obviously 3 branches of root loci will be present. Then for those 3 branches of root loci, there must be 3 finishing points also. If suppose there are 3 poles in the given open loop transfer function and there is only one single 0, then that means to say one of the branches of root loci is going to terminate at one of the zeros, but rest 2 branches of root loci which have started, where will they terminate? So, that is why if you just subtract number of zeros from the number of poles, whatever you get, that will be the number of branches of root loci which will be terminating at infinity, because finite 0 was only 1, as I have just now discussed with the example. There are 3 poles, there is 1 0. Then 3 branches of root loci will be starting, whereas one of the branch of root loci will terminate at the given 0, and 2 rest of the branches of root loci will be terminating at infinity. That is why we call it as infinite zeros. So, Then rule number 3, the number of branches of root loci. How many branches of root loci will be there? That is denoted by n. Number of branches of root loci will be equal to number of poles if number of poles is greater than number of zeros. Then number of branches of root loci will be equal to number of zeros if number of zeros will be greater than number of poles. This is the rule. Then number of branches of root loci terminating at infinity, as just now I gave the example in this case, right? If the number of zeros is less than the number of poles, obviously then some of the branches of root loci will be terminating at infinity. That is what it means to say number of branches of root loci terminating at infinity. It is given by p minus z, number of poles minus number of zeros, whatever is left, those many branches of root loci will terminate at infinity. Then if suppose all the poles and zeros, rule number 4 is symmetry. Root loci will normally be symmetric about the axis. Root loci will normally be symmetric. So if what will be the axis of symmetry? If all the poles and zeros of a given open loop transfer function lie on the real axis, if all the poles and zeros of a given open loop transfer function lie on the real axis, then the branches of root loci will be symmetric about the real axis. That is what is the rule. Okay. So now what it means to say is, very normally the root loci will be traveling in pairs in the opposite direction. If real axis, if all the poles and zeros lie on the real axis, then if there is a branch of root loci going above the real axis, the same on the opposite side, one more branch of root loci will be passing through. So say the root loci will be symmetric about the real axis if all the poles and zeros lie on the real axis. That is what is said in the rule number 4, that is symmetry. Then see, as I have told in the definition of root loci, that if one or more of the parameter of a given control system is varied over a given range, then the roots of its characteristic equation are also going to vary, and they result in what? There is, when they are plotted onto the S plane, then they result in continuous curves. Root loci or the root locus are not straight lines, they are the curves. Now when they are the curves, then what is the direction of their travel? Since they are not the straight lines, since they are the curves, it is important to guide these curves along which direction they are going to travel. So in root locus technique, we say that the branches of root loci can be guided by the presence of asymptotic straight lines. Asymptotic straight lines. So in whatever angle we draw the asymptotic straight lines, in those angles or in those directions, the branches of root loci will also travel. Since they are the curves, we definitely need to guide the root locus or root loci plot. So that is the curve, and how can we guide it? By drawing the asymptotic straight line. So at what angle should we draw the asymptotic straight lines? Why? Because the root loci or the branches of root loci are addressed as they always travel along the asymptotic straight line. Mind it, I said along the asymptotic straight line, not on the asymptotic straight line. In one or two cases, the root loci may travel on the asymptotic straight line, but that is only coincidence. Otherwise, what we call is, or what we say is, as the branches of root loci travel along the asymptotic straight lines. So whatever will be the angle of asymptotic straight lines, along that direction the root loci will also be traveling. So it is important to know the angle of asymptotes. So rule number 5 speaks about the angle of asymptotes. See, that is given by theta k. Theta k is equal to 2q plus 1 into 180 degree divided by p minus z. Now what is this q? Q is given by 0, 1, 2 up to modulus of p minus z minus 1. Here one thing is very, very important. I told up to, I did not tell the value, just modulus of p minus z minus 1. You have to start giving the value of q as 0. Theta 0 is equal to 2 into 0 plus 1 into 180 by number of poles minus number of zeros. then whatever you get here, suppose number of poles is 4, number of zeros is 1.
So here modulus you will get
4 minus 1 minus 1. So it will be 2.
Modulus
Of 2. That means to say you will have to start from 0, giving the value of q as 0. You will have to give the next value as 1. You will have to give the next value as 2, because up to 0, 1, 2, dash, 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 up to the
modulus of
p minus z minus 1. That is what it means to say. Illustration, you can find it very easy to understand with the help of a problem, which will be switching over to very soon. Then thereby we will get several asymptotic straight lines and their angles. Then rule number 6, see asymptotic straight lines, no doubt they will be moving at different angles, guiding the root locus, the branches of root loci. But the asymptotic straight lines should start on the real axis. Where should they start? So all the asymptotic straight lines, whether 2 asymptotic straight lines or 3 or 4, depending upon whatever number of angles you will get there. So they will all meet on the real axis at a point. They will all start from that point and go in various directions at various angles, as has been calculated in rule number 5. But their initiation, their beginning, their root will lie on the real axis. So where they lie, where will they meet on the real axis? So that meeting point of all the asymptotic straight lines onto the real axis is called centroid, and it is denoted by sigma. Now how will you calculate centroid? By using this formula, summation of pi minus summation of zi. So pi and zi is sum of all the individual poles, sum of all the individual zeros, divided by p minus z, number of poles minus number of zeros. So if you do that, you will get the centroid. So that will be the point from where the asymptotic straight lines will emerge on the real axis. Now rule number 7, how do you know on the real axis where all the root locus or the branches of root loci are present? How do you know it? So it is very simple here. You just draw a plane. Then suppose there is a pole here, there is a pole here, there is a pole here, there is a 0 over here. Where the root locus, the branches of root loci lie? So it means to say that, see, what you need to do is you just hold, you leave the first particular point, then you just keep your hand here, look towards your right side. The sum of all the poles and zeros, number of poles and zeros, if it is odd, then root locus will be present between here and here. The root locus will be present from here and here. And then see, all poles are the starting points we have told in the beginning, the rule number 1 itself. So the root locus will start here, will start here. Why we have written these arrows is because we have found that between, say it is 0, say minus 2, minus 4, say minus 6, then what we tend to say is between, say minus 2 and 0, the count from, if you keep your hand here, look towards your right side, if the count is odd, that is, as you can see here, there is only one pole present here. If the count is odd, so root locus will be present. Then come to the next point, that is next pole, that is minus 4 over here. You just keep your hand here, look towards your right side. There is a pole here, there is a pole here. The count is 2. So when it is even, 2 is even, then that means to say between minus 4 and minus 2, the root locus will not be present. Then again similarly, come to the next point, minus 6, there is a 0. Look towards your right, 1, 2 and 3. So the count is 3. Irrespective of whether it is pole or 0, you have to take the count. So the count is 3, that means it is odd. The system, the branch root loci will be existing between minus 6 and minus 4. Minus 4. Since this is a starting point, the arrow will be leaving the pole. Since this is a 0, the arrow will be towards the 0, so it will be terminating. Rule number 7 is that. Rule number 8, if the angle of asymptotes is found to be such that it is crossing the imaginary axis and moving to the right half of S plane, then what it means to say is even the branches of root loci are also going to cross the imaginary axis and move to the right half of S plane. Then it means to say that the moment the portion of branch of root loci move towards the right half of S plane, that means to say at that particular point where it intersects the imaginary axis and moving to the right half of S plane, the system becomes unstable. That is very important inference to be drawn from the root locus plot. So, in such a case, wherever the branch of root loci is going to cross the imaginary axis and move to the right half of S plane like this. Say, if this is the asymptotic straight line, say here where you can see, if this is the root loci, root locus, then here is the point where it is crossing the imaginary axis and moving to the right half of S plane. If such is the case, where exactly it is crossing the imaginary axis, that point is called intersection of root loci with the imaginary axis. So, where exactly it is crossing it, so that you must know. And then further, at what frequency the intersection of root loci is happening with the imaginary axis, even that is also to be known. So, that information you will be able to get, that information of where exactly the branch of root loci intersects the imaginary axis and what is the frequency at which it intersects. So, both these informations you will be able to get with rule number 8, intersection of root loci with the imaginary axis. How we are able to get it? By using the formula 1 plus GSHS equal to 0. Then, see, whenever there are two root loci, the branch of root loci exists between these two, you suppose, and then both of them will be traveling against one another. One branch of root loci has started from this pole, the other branch has started from this pole. Then when both of them are heading towards one another, then there must be a point where they must collide, and once they collide, they will break away. That is why it is called breakaway point. Or even this is also possible. There is a 0 here, there is a 0 here. Zeros are nothing but the terminating points or finishing points, and if the root loci exists between these two, then root loci will be, the arrow will be moving towards the zeros. Here it was, arrow was leaving the poles, whereas here it is moving into the zeros, terminating. So, it goes and terminates here. Then what happens is, from somewhere the branches of root loci may have come, and they may have come here, and they may have joined on this particular part, real axis. So, here these two, as you can see, the arrows are heading towards one another. That means they will collide at some point and move out. This is called breakaway point. This is called saddle point. So, root loci, branches of root loci coming from somewhere, meeting here and moving towards these two zeros. So, where it meets on the real axis, it is called saddle point. Here, two branches of root loci colliding and breaking away, that is what is called breakaway point. So, it is important, in order to draw the root locus plot, it is very important to know where the breakaway point or where the saddle point will be existing for a given open loop transfer function. That is given by rule number 9, that is breakaway point or saddle point. And how we calculate where they exactly break away or where the saddle point exists is by differentiating GSHS with respect to S. So, d by ds of GSHS or d by dt of GSHS, we will be able to get breakaway point or the saddle point. Then lastly, if suppose we are given with complex poles or zeros, if we are given with complex poles or zeros like S plus 2 plus 2j, S plus 2 minus 2j. So, 2 plus 2j and 2 minus 2j, they are complex poles or they are complex zeros. In such a case, so whenever there are complex poles, they cannot be marked on x-axis or y-axis or real axis or imaginary axis straight away. They must be marked in space, either in first quadrant or second quadrant or so. So such poles are called complex poles. Whenever such poles or such zeros are there, either starting points or the terminating points, then obviously if they are complex poles, then the root locus has to start from them. If they are complex zeros, then root locus must terminate on them. So in such a case, since they are in space, being complex, they will be in space in first quadrant or the second quadrant. In what direction, if it is a pole, in what direction the branches of root loci will depart from that pole? Or if it is a zero, at what angle the root locus, the branch of root locus will come and terminate at that particular complex pole. That will become very important to be calculated. That we will be able to know with rule number 10, that is angle of departure or angle of arrival, and which is denoted by phi d or phi a. Phi d means when a complex pole is existing, then the branch of root loci or root locus must start from that complex pole. If it is starting, then in what direction will it start from the complex pole? So that is where we get to know the angle of departure. If it is a complex zero, then the branch of root loci must terminate at that particular complex zero. So from what direction the branch of root loci is traveling towards that zero, that will be given by angle of arrival phi a, phi d, or what we tend to say is phi a. That we will be able to get to know by using this formula. Phi is equal to, it may be phi d or phi a, is equal to summation of phi p minus summation of phi z. Summation of phi p means it will be the angle of all the poles added together, summation, and angle of all the zeros added together, and summation of phi p and all, that will be the procedure. So these are the 10 rules, and here not all the problems will demand the application of all the 10 rules. For example, if and only if there are complex poles or zeros, the rule number 10, that is, you need to find the angle of departure or arrival. If there are no complex poles or zeros, then this is not applicable. We can just write a comment that since there are no complex poles or zeros, this rule is not applicable. Breakaway point, if two branches of root loci are colliding, or if two branches of root loci are meeting on some axis and heading towards one another, then angle of breakaway point or saddle point will come into existence. Otherwise, even this is not applicable. Then here, this rule of intersection of root loci with the imaginary axis will be applicable only and only when the branch of root loci are crossing the imaginary axis and moving to the right half of S plane. How will we get to know in advance? By knowing the angle of asymptotes. If we get to see the angle of asymptotes, we will be able to write the asymptotic straight line onto the graph, and once we write the graph, then we will get to know if asymptotic straight lines are intersecting the imaginary axis and moving to the right half of S plane, then obviously the branches of root loci will also cross the imaginary axis and move to the right half of S plane. Why? Because the branches of root loci will travel along asymptotic straight lines only. So only and only if from the asymptotic angle of asymptotes we find that they are crossing the imaginary axis and moving to the right half of S plane, we can assume that the branches of root loci will also cross the imaginary axis and move to the right half of S plane. In such a case, we need to find the intersection of root loci with the imaginary axis. If asymptotic straight lines, the angle of asymptotes itself is found to be such that it is not at all crossing the imaginary axis, it is not moving to the right half of S plane, then we can ascertain that even the branches of root loci will also not cross the imaginary axis. In such a case, there will be no intersection of root loci with the imaginary axis. Then in such problems, this rule, that is rule number 8, will not be applicable. As such, these 10 rules may or may not be applicable altogether at once. So some of the rules may be applicable and some of the rules may not be applicable, depending upon what kind of the open loop transfer function is given to us.